Billionaire CEO Jeff Bezos is running for his life, arms and legs pumping as fast as they will go. Behind him, he can hear the mob advancing, closing in. He has to lose them, has to find a way to throw them off the trail. Up ahead, an opportunity presents itself, a narrow alleyway. He ducks down the alley, heart pounding in his chest, as he listens to the footsteps of his pursuers sprint past him. They're gone. He's safe. For now. He takes a moment to catch his breath, vision swimming from the panic and exhaustion, and suddenly catches a metallic glint out of the corner of his eye. Uh-oh. He's not as alone as he thought he was. He straightens and prepares to defend himself from the strange, wild-eyed man at the other side of the alley. The man who is slowly advancing toward him, holding a knife and a fork. When it comes to the lifestyles of the ultra-wealthy, many of us struggle to wrap our minds around what they might get up to during the day. Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. What do these famous billionaires do with their time? Profiles of the industry giants paint a picture of early morning and green juice, of long meetings and business trips to exotic locales. For Jeff Bezos, that's a pretty accurate picture, or at least it used to be. On one fateful day, the Amazon CEO found his extraordinarily ordinary routine turned completely upside down. In a series of bizarre, terrifying events, the dream life of a tech billionaire became a nightmare. The day started like pretty much any other. Jeff climbed out of bed at 6:30 a.m., honoring his personal motto of early to bed, early to rise. This left him with the morning to himself so he could take his time settling into the day. He brewed a pot of coffee and read the newspaper for a while. When the kids woke up, he whipped up a batch of pancakes for them. Then, at 10 a.m., it was time to leave the kids with the nanny and head off to work. First, a meeting with the shareholders, then a lunch meeting with the head of a company he was considering purchasing. Then it was time to drop in on an Amazon fulfillment center for a surprise visit. After all, who doesn't love unexpectedly seeing their boss's boss's boss in the middle of a busy workday? When he arrived, Jeff greeted everyone and then took the operations manager aside for a one-on-one meeting. He wanted to check in about productivity and all the usual things. Were employees taking too many bathroom breaks? How quickly could they move packages? Just standard questions. But as he talked, he couldn't help but notice his employee's eyes glazing over a bit. He asked the man if he was feeling all right, but the manager assured Jeff that he was just hungry. It was almost his lunch break, and he was looking forward to the leftover meatloaf waiting for him. Well, Jeff wanted the man to be focused during their meeting, so he offered to go ahead and start the lunch break now. After all, the ideal lunch break is one that you're also working during. They sat down in the break room together, and Jeff could hear the man's stomach growling. He wasn't kidding about being hungry. But the cold meatloaf would surely sate his hunger and get the conversation back on track. The man picked at his meatloaf while Jeff continued speaking, delivering an inspirational speech on improving metrics and worker efficiency. As he became more passionate, as he often did when talking about efficiency, he began to gesticulate more dramatically. As he became lost in his own brilliant words and corporate wisdom, he didn't notice the operations manager abandoning the meatloaf entirely, staring instead at Jeff's hand, which was drifting closer and closer to his face. Jeff was just about to reach the conclusion of his point and send the employee on his merry way when the operations manager all of a sudden snatched Jeff's hand out of the air, pulled it in close, and bit down hard. Jeff yanked his hand from the other man's grasp, crying out in pain and shock. He'd had employees respond poorly to feedback before, but never like this. Usually they just cried or threatened to quit. No one had ever bitten him before. He demanded an explanation for this behavior, which was certainly not appropriate for the workplace. The operations manager blinked, brow furrowed in confusion. He couldn't articulate why he had done it, what had possessed him to grab the CEO's hand and attempt to chow down. He offered up the only explanation he could. He was hungry, and Jeff looked delicious. The words sent a chill down the billionaire's spine. He stood up and excused himself from the meeting. He left the fulfillment center and left work for the day. In fact, he left town altogether. This was all too much, and he needed a vacation. He called the nanny to let her know he wouldn't be coming home for a little while. No need for him to pack a bag. Anything he needed he could purchase when he arrived at whatever luxury hotel he settled on. He called up his favorite pilot, told him to pick a destination with an exclusive, private resort, something with a spa so he could relax, and within the hour, he was sitting on his private jet preparing for takeoff. When the jet reached cruising altitude, one of the usual flight attendants came to his seat, pouring him a glass of red wine, one of the nicer bottles on board, as she could tell he was having a difficult day. She also offered a variety of snacks. This was no commercial airline with its peanuts and pretzels. This was a luxury craft with luxury snacks. Crostini with French butter and freshly shaved truffles, a charcuterie board with the finest meats and cheeses, fresh fruit, and chilled oysters were all on the menu. Jeff treated himself to a little nibble or two, finished his wine, and kicked back for a nap. He awoke sometime later, not to the comforting feeling of the jet's smooth landing, but to an odd, greasy sensation on his arm. He opened his eyes to find the same flight attendant spreading some of that French butter onto his forearm before shaving some of the black truffle onto the skin. All the while, she was licking her lips, a ravenous look in her eye, like someone about to cut into a beautiful cut of Kobe beef. Jeff shook her off of him, shouting at her to stop. Thankfully, the plane touched down before she could try anything else, and he disembarked as quickly as possible, grabbing a hot towel on the way out to wipe the butter from his arm. Was everyone losing their minds today? Good thing he was somewhere he could relax and forget about his troubles for a little while. He had been to this particular resort and spa before, whenever he needed a bit of a physical and emotional tune-up. He accepted his complimentary glass of champagne from the check-in desk, and after reserving the finest suite available, he headed down to the spa to start putting the chaos and oddities of the day behind him. It was impossible to be stressed out in a place like this, with the soothing music, the aromatherapeutic scents pumped into the room, and of course, the spa's patented herbally infused hot springs. Naturally occurring hot springs water was pumped into private baths and filled with a variety of herbs with calming properties, including sage and rosemary. The attendant handed Jeff a towel and a fluffy white robe for after his soak, and with a sigh of relief, he settled into the steaming, herbaceous water. He didn't notice that the attendant hadn't left the room yet. He was too busy relaxing, closing his eyes, and letting his troubles drift away. He stretched out his legs, feeling the muscles uncoil and release their tension, feeling the bits of fresh herbs in the bath tickle his skin. He took a deep breath, savoring the fresh scent of the sage, the rosemary, the garlic? Well, garlic did have some anti-inflammatory properties. Perhaps this was a new part of the treatment. He settled back into the experience again, trying to clear his mind, but as he struggled to maintain his relaxation, he became distinctly aware that the soak was becoming, well, he could only describe it as chunky. He opened his eyes and discovered that, in addition to the herbs and garlic, there were now slices of onion floating through the water, along with chunks of carrot and potato. There, at the other side of the large tub, the attendant was sprinkling salt and pepper into the water. This wasn't a soak at all. It was soup. It was Jeff Bezos soup. The attendant was just dipping a spoon into the water to taste the broth when Jeff pulled him into the water, using the sudden distraction to make a run for it. He didn't have time to grab the robe, just throwing the towel around his waist and getting out of there as quickly as possible. He tore through the spa, ignoring the signs that urged guests not to run in the area. There was no time to play by the rules. But he didn't consider why those rules might be in place. Not until his feet slipped on the wet, slick floor and he crashed to the ground. His head hit the tile and everything went dark. When Jeff opened his eyes again, he was sitting in a doctor's office, wearing a hospital gown. A doctor was taking his vitals and greeted him when he saw the CEO regaining consciousness. He had, she explained, sustained a mild concussion when he hit his head in the spa. The hotel staff had brought him into a nearby urgent care facility, unsure of what else to do. Luckily, his injuries weren't too bad. He would experience a bit of dizziness, maybe some nausea, but he was going to be just fine. Jeff was inclined to disagree. He didn't think that he would be just fine. He explained to the doctor that something terrible was going on, something that was going to sound crazy. For some reason, everywhere he went today, people were trying to, well, eat him. The doctor looked at him with a knowing smile. She understood, she told him. He was under so much pressure all the time. It couldn't be easy, being one of the richest men in the world, the head of one of the largest companies out there. The stress was getting to him. It made sense. But there was no way that people were really trying to eat him. That was absurd. She offered to give him a sedative, something to take the edge off and help him to calm down and focus on recovering from his injuries. Reluctantly, he agreed, and she left the room for a moment to prepare the injection. He took a deep breath, struggling to center himself. She was right, of course. There weren't people trying to eat him. When ordinary people said eat the rich, they didn't mean it literally, right? They just meant that he should start paying taxes or something silly like that. They weren't actually trying to cook him and devour his flesh. That would be insane. The doctor came back into the room, and Jeff was just beginning to believe it might be true, that this might all be in his head. But then, he looked at the object in her hand and saw not a syringe, but a turkey baster. No, the doctor was in on it. Was nowhere safe? He barreled out of the office, knocking the doctor to the floor as he went. He needed to get to the authorities. Surely they could help him. He ran to the nearest police station, bursting through the doors and blurting out his story to the first officer he saw. There was only one problem. They didn't know who he was. All the police officers saw was a barefoot man in a hospital gown with no identification on him, claiming that he was CEO Jeff Bezos, and a bunch of different people were trying to eat him. They laughed him out of the station, but not before threatening to place him into an involuntary hold at a psych hospital. Jeff couldn't let that happen. Locked up somewhere with no way out? That would be the perfect place for someone to corner him, to capture him, and cook him up for dinner. No, he couldn't let that happen. He fled the police station and found himself wandering the streets, unsure of what to do, where to go. He had nothing with him. No money, no phone, no hope. None of his usual staff were there. He couldn't call a car, couldn't pay for a taxi, and most importantly, he couldn't trust anyone. As Jeff walked down the street, muttering to himself and struggling to come up with a plan of action, he began to notice that he was drawing a bit of a crowd. It made sense. He certainly was a bizarre sight. A nearly naked man talking to himself in the middle of the street. But the crowd had a look in their eyes that Jeff didn't like. They were licking their lips, rubbing their stomachs. Some of them drooled. They talked amongst themselves, first in hushed tones, but then louder, bolder, as they shared their homicidal hunger as a group. They were discussing ways to prepare him, what would taste the best. One woman wanted to make him into chicken-fried Jeff steak, dunking him in batter and frying him up in a pan. Another suggested they stuff him full of mushrooms and bake him in a red wine reduction. One man argued that they should keep it simple and just grill him with a little bit of salt and pepper to allow the meat to retain its natural flavor. But they all agreed on one thing. They wanted to catch Jeff so that they could prepare him for consumption. At this point, there was only one thought left in Jeff Bezos' head: run. And so he did. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, bare feet tripping over the uneven, rough terrain. His recently concussed head was aching and spinning, and he felt his stomach turn, but he had to keep running. The mob chased after him, grasping at him with greedy hands. Some of them were unarmed, others wielded knives, forks, meat cleavers. Some had brought condiments with them, attempting to spray him with ketchup, mustard, barbecue sauce. He felt something hit him and looked down at his shirt to see a spray of red. At first, he worried it was blood, but a quick taste revealed that it was marinara sauce instead. Somehow, that was even worse. Up ahead, he could see an alley, somewhere he could duck in and hopefully avoid the mob. He managed to tuck and roll out of the way, the mob's momentum carrying them past the alley as Jeff disappeared into its darkness. But he wasn't alone there. A man was waiting for him, with a knife, a fork, and an appetite. He was cornered. Did this spell doom for Jeff Bezos? As he prepared to face that grim possibility, suddenly someone behind Jeff called for the would-be assailant to drop his weapons. He did, eyes wide with fear. Jeff turned around and saw a man in a uniform, like a military, but not any military organization he recognized, brandishing a similarly unrecognizable weapon. The attacker fled the scene, and the man in uniform introduced himself to Jeff. He was from a special organization, he explained, called the SCP Foundation. They were responsible for investigating strange happenings, and Jeff had found himself as the focal point of a very strange happening indeed. Jeff Bezos processed this new information quickly and offered a handshake to the SCP Foundation officer. Would this foundation, he asked, be interested in a business partnership? SCP-5821 is a persistent memetic effect impacting the entire human population of Earth, which causes the belief that the flesh of Jeffrey Preston Bezos, billionaire founder, CEO, and president of Amazon.com Inc., is the best and most desirable meat for human consumption. Sorry, I misspoke there. The effect impacts every human on Earth except for Jeff Bezos himself, also known as SCP-5821-1. Only a small number are affected enough to act on it, attempting to assassinate and cannibalize SCP-5821-1. Memetic Degradation Analysis has been performed by Foundation researchers, placing the point of origin for the memetic property at sometime between April and August of 1997. Since this time, the meme has increased in strength and reach, with more and more individuals succumbing to its effects and acting on it violently. After becoming aware of its effects, SCP-5821-1 has been cooperating with Foundation containment efforts and has established a friendly relationship with the SCP Foundation as a whole. SCP-5821-1 has played an unprecedented role in devising measures to contain the anomaly that impacts him, collaborating directly with the Foundation in order to decide on the best course of action. Currently, SCP-5821 is contained by PTF Lambda-27, Amazon Brigade, who prevent any individuals from attacking Bezos or, as would be the natural conclusion of these attacks, cooking and eating him. Members of this group must be rotated out periodically so that they do not succumb to the effects of SCP-5821 and use their proximity to carry out an attack of their own. From what I can gather, there's been a great deal of debate amongst Foundation researchers regarding the best way to adjust containment procedures moving forward. Some have suggested that dissolving Bezos' corporation and stripping him of his assets might take some of this memetic effect's power away. Others disagree, though whether that is the result of sincerely held scientific conclusions or an appreciation for the monetary donations Bezos has made to the organization remains to be seen. A memo from O5-7 was attached to the official file regarding some new proposals for SCP-5821 containment. The contents read, "It has come to my attention that some alternate containment proposals have recently been discussed. I am saddened to inform you that while your initiative in devising new and exciting methods of containment is commendable, the containment of SCP-5821 will not be subject to change for the foreseeable future. The models predicting the total domination of the human psyche by SCP-5821 by 2050, while alarming, are still very new, and consensus has not been reached by Foundation predictive divisions. I personally can tell you that some sources known to the O5 Council suggest that the meme may perhaps be dissipating. As such, drastic unproven measures, such as Foundation seizure of the Amazon Corporation or the dissolution of SCP-5821-1's assets, simply cannot be justified, to say nothing of possible assassination. To address a specific point of contention some of you brought up, while letting the subject of an anomaly weigh in on the methods and intricacies of its containment may be unorthodox, trust me when I say it's for the greater good. SCP-5821-1 understands intimately the difficulties the Foundation faces in containing the dangerous anomalies that threaten our world, and has generously compensated us for resources used. I understand fully that this may be difficult and confusing for you, and following the conclusion of my Caribbean yacht cruise, I am willing to take the time to discuss this issue one-on-one with anyone who continues to take grievance with these actions. Sincerely, O5-7. Following the release of this memo, an unusual phenomenon began to take hold among the SCP-5821 research staff. Several of them now expressed a strong desire to consume the flesh of O5-7. Somehow, through cooperation with SCP-5821-1, O5-7 has been infected with the same anomalous property. To be perfectly honest, I think it might be best if I conclude my research into this topic here, because the more I think about it, the tastier these two are starting to look to me. If you'll excuse me, I'm off to order some dinner. I think something vegetarian tonight. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-4003 on cowboys, Catholicism, and the Cretaceous.